this machine actually helps push the fluid through with a turbulent force that allows it to really capture what's happening inside the scope instead of just a complete flush of like a syringe or something. It really gives a good push and it collects the fluid at the end in an enclosed system. And you're able to take that and sample it. And then you can put your scope through a drying process and stuff. So it's a really great little piece of equipment and technology that's come out and really helped that one of those complicated issues that we have and we see trying to solve that.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
On this Vendor Spotlight, we speak with Malinda Elammari, Clinical Education Specialist with Healthmark, now a Getinge Company. We're going to be highlighting a number of Healthmark's products and services today with Malinda, many of which on the services side, she goes out and actually does personally, like these consultative practice reviews. We're going to tell you all about what that is and how they offer it at no charge as a value add to SPD departments across the country. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Malinda.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
I am speaking now with Malinda Elammari, Clinical Education Specialist with Healthmark, now a Getinge Company. And Malinda, I got to say, if anybody's gone to the annual conferences or has any kind of run in their SPD career, I'm sure that they're very familiar with you by now, but I want to welcome you to the Beyond Clean podcast. Well, well, first off,
I don't know.
You made several appearances on Beyond Clean, so I mean that's a good thing from my perspective. But you tell me what skeletons you have in your closet.
That's another show entirely.
Well, anyway, let me welcome you to the Beyond Clean podcast. And again, you're no stranger, but we're doing a vendor spotlight for Healthmark today. We're going to be covering a number of different things, but why don't we just start with, tell us about your background. So let's say there's somebody who's not familiar with you, or maybe they know you, but they don't really know your background. They just know you, from your role with Healthmark. So tell everybody about your sterile processing path.
Yes. Okay. Sure. So like you said, I'm a clinical education specialist. This is what I do in my daytime. No, I'm joking. I don't have a nighttime job. I do it during night too, I guess. I eat, sleep, breathe SPD now. So I really started my career off in the medical field as a surgical tech. I started off working in an outpatient center and then moved to open hearts. So did open heart for about 8.5 years, but scrubbed all other different specialties and stuff like that. One of the crazy parts is that when I scrubbed, when you didn't have any cases and the main OR didn't need you, you had to go to sterile processing before you could go home. If sterile processing didn't need you, then you could go home. So I spent a lot of time in sterile processing. And as a scrub tech, for me, I loved it. I loved the job. I loved doing what I got to do every day. But there was just nowhere to go. There was no growth other than being a nurse. And I knew I did not want to do that. Kudos to all you nurses out there, but not me.
I've done it. I get it.
See? I'm like, nope. And so I knew that wasn't really the path I wanted to do. And so I tried to advance. And I tried to get a job as the manager of sterile processing at the hospital I was at, and they wound up denying me, which now in hindsight was really good for me, because I would have just set myself up for major failure, because I thought I knew sterile processing, but as you learn sterile processing, you realize you don't know nothing. So that kind of took me into my path. I joined IMS and worked with IMS, moved out of state, and went through a series of different positions with them, and then Steris as well. And since then joined Duke and was the clinical educator and quality control manager. So been in multiple different roles in SPD, did a lot of different things over the years, seen a lot of different places. So right now with Healthmark, very involved with AMI standards, co-chair for the dental working group and co-chair for the packaging working group, which also mirrors ISO, the international standards. I've gotten very involved in medical device packaging, which I've really learned to love and have a newfound appreciation for packaging. Never think about it until, you can't get something open, right?
Yeah. Well, just to encourage people's involvement in AMI, they're always looking for people from the front lines and getting those voices. And I think you would learn a lot, just as you mentioned that you have around packaging. I also know that dental work group, how important that is, because it's an often overlooked area, and obviously dental practices do not have the benefit of being exposed to sterile processing unless they're part of some, sort of organization or surgery that is falling under, a health system. And so I think setting those standards and guidelines is really, really important for that area.
Yeah, it's a smaller group, clinical kind of settings, and often overlooked on truly just, do they have what they need to do their job correctly, and I think a lot of it is because it's not considered sterile kind of area. So, it's a lot. And I think the standard coming out is really going to give some great guidance for, the dental industry. And I'm really excited to be a part of that. So.
Well, I know Healthmark has placed an emphasis on being, part of those AMI committees and work groups. And obviously you have a very large clinical education team there, many of whom we have spoken with over the years. And I think that's like a big focus for Healthmark, but I thought maybe you could talk a little bit more, about that focus that Healthmark has, just as an approach to supporting the industry.
Yeah. I think one of the things and it's crazy because that's really how I started working with Healthmark, was I was there representing Duke. At first, the first day I sat there because I was nervous and I didn't say anything. The second day I was just like, oh no, I can't do this. And so I started talking and, I was just like, oh. And so it just went from there. I had some encouragement from the Healthmark. Actually, one of the old Healthmark employees, South Hendy, he was the first one who came up to me and he was just like, hey, keep it up. You're doing great. And so it just went from there, and they were able to see, what I can do and my passion and my love for the industry and the people in the industry. And, they were like, hey, we want you to join the team. So from that perspective, one of the things that really stood up to me was, the Basiles, former owners of Healthmark, were extremely invested in making sure that this industry was well educated, had knowledge. They were, they provided and put so much into ensuring that the educators were well knowledged and involved in this industry by being a part of AMIs. So we are all part of so many of the working groups and creating the standards. A lot of us are co-chairs now for a lot of the working groups. So it's been amazing being a part of this team and really seeing the passion that this company has for this industry and the betterment of the people that's in it.
Yeah. And I think too, the ability to ensure that the sterile processing teams out there have the tools that they need. So your Healthmark is not only a manufacturer, but you're a distributor. So if you don't make it yourself, you're out there looking for other manufacturers who may be able to bring a product into the market that either is a process improvement, maybe it's easier to use, or in general, addressing a gap in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. I like to jokingly say that we're the Target of SPD. We're not Walmart, we're the Target. It's like you go in and you can find pretty much anything you're looking for to help solve your issues in the department. So really love the fact that it's kind of like a one-stop shop for a lot of stuff that we provide. And a lot of the stuff that we provide, to your point, are things that we do. We are a distributor. Like, we do help get products out there. And there are some things that we manufacture ourselves. There's things that we're like, hey, you know what? This is needed. So, there's nothing out there to solve this problem. Let's help it. Let's create something that's going to do the job that's needed.
So in your role, you're out there in the field, you're supporting sterile processing managers and supervisors and directors and teams. You're probably, with your background in the operating room, also advocating, in that setting as part of your role as well, to just kind of help everything flow. But like, what are the things that you typically see when you're out there that you feel like routinely, and maybe not so routinely, but routinely, you're out there and you're like, okay, these are obvious needs that we're able to come in and kind of work on making improvements and providing maybe education, guidance, etc.
Routinely, I would say insulation testers. With the new amendments coming out with Amy for ST79, those amendments, the 4 amendments, Amendment 2 talked about insulation testing, and that includes like your cords, your monopolar, bipolar cords, also your monopolar, bipolar forceps, anything that's insulated used with electrocautery surgery. And so a lot of facilities still don't understand that it's not just laparoscopic instruments anymore. It has to be your forceps and, I guess, or cords, right? You've got to test the continuity of the cord going from one end to the other. Cause you remember in the operating room, they're like, hey, this isn't working. Turn the Bovie up. And they just keep jacking up the voltage on the Bovie to try and get the burn. But really the problem is it's electric current issue inside your cord.
And you don't even know where the cord is lying, whether that's arcing onto the patient somewhere, nowhere near the surgical procedure. And last thing you want to do is have a patient with a significant electrical burn somewhere on their body that wasn't identified. And they're going to know that happened during the case.
Yeah. And there's a lot of MAUDE data reports around that from the FDA about fire starting from the cords and stuff. So ensuring that your cord is not just, doesn't just have the electricity going from one end to the other end, continuity, but also ensuring that the insulation on your cord, to your point, is intact so you don't get a spark or an arc that causes a fire on the drapes or something of the patient. And so I think, going into facilities, we see so many times that people just don't have the right equipment to do it. And so, with the insulation tester, the one that we sell, the McGann one has a connector for the cord where you can just put the cord through and pull it through and it'll pick up any issues with the insulation on it versus I have to lay it out and I have to brush it. I mean, if that's what you have and that's what you can do, great. You need to be doing it. But the compliance of that, come on, how compliant are we going to be?
Yeah, it's just not like, these are common things that need to happen in the SPD, but common requirements does not always mean practical application or practically operationalized, especially with certain staffing situations, et cetera. I kind of want to, I know you're also there as a team, the education team, with more complicated issues. So that was a great example of maybe a common SPD task that really does need some consultation to make practical. But what about complicated issues? What are you running into for some of those scenarios that maybe people are just still struggling with, and it just is a constant challenge for them that you're able to help with?
Yeah, I think so. Like a more complicated, I would say for me right now is flexible scopes. Those are like the vein of everybody's existence right now, especially with ST91 coming out, the new standard on that. There's a lot of guidance, which is amazing and great that we now have more guidance. But with guidance comes the need for how do we do this? Procedures, implementation, standard work procedures putting into place. There's a lot of things that have to go into that and pieces of equipment. So I would say for me, complicated right now would be flexible scopes. And so like, for instance, for that, we now developed a product called the TFF, the Turbulent Fluid Flow System. And so basically what it does is that, it helps with the drying of your scopes. So you can dry scopes because part of the new standard says that your scopes have to be dried prior to be placing into your storage. And then also it helps the biggest key point with this is that it helps with your collecting your samples, because your scopes that are high risk, which duodenoscopes, all of the bronchoscopes, all of those scopes now are considered high risk. They have to be tested each time they come through for cleaning verification. And so this machine actually helps push the fluid through with a turbulent force that allows it to really capture what's happening inside the scope instead of just a complete flush of like a syringe or something. It really gives a good push and it collects the fluid at the end in an enclosed system, and you're able to take that and sample it. And then you can put your scope through a drying process and stuff. So, it's a really great little piece of equipment and technology that's come out and really helped that one of those complicated issues that we have and we see, trying to solve that.
I remember when CRE really was hitting the radar, and honestly, it probably would have been the number one topic in infection control if it were not for, COVID-19. And I think it took a little luster away from CRE, but it's still the same challenge it was prior to the pandemic. It's just interesting, there's only so many things that can stay on everybody's radar, right? And so, I think that cleaning verification is so important. So I guess before we start talking about 4 products that we wanted to highlight in this conversation, I also wanted to bring up the fact I mentioned Healthmark now, a Getinge Company. How has that changed even more how you're able to support your customer base out there?
Yeah. So the great part with being part of Getinge now is that we're basically the complete gamut concept, right? Like we've got capital equipment, sterilizers, washers, all of that equipment side. And now combined with the disposable kind of products on our side. So it's a really great powerhouse for the hospitals to have on their side. In addition, with the education team and the education that Healthmark brings, it's been amazing just joining together and the things that are coming out of it and the things that, we see going to the future of what's going to happen, because once again, like right now with Healthmark, we would go into facilities and we're like, we really need this kind of concept to happen, like maybe a big piece of equipment, or maybe if the washers did this, and we really didn't have a way to do anything about that. Now we're like, oh, hey, wait a second. We now make washers. So guess what? We should try this, And so just the idea of what we can accomplish in the future together is just going to be amazing. And I'm excited to see what's coming out of that. But yeah, I'm excited for the customers on, having once again, that, I don't know, I guess it wouldn't be Target anymore then, right? Would it be like BJ's or Costco's? I don't know.
Yeah. I think equipment.
I need a new analogy.
It's almost like if Target bought Home Depot or vice
Yeah, right.
versa,
There you
right?
go.
Like, yeah.
Exactly.
All right, I love it. So let's start going through the products. I recently recorded a podcast ad that's been running on Beyond Clean podcast about Zen detergent, and I think I, definitely played up the Zen. But we're going to start with this. We're going to talk about the Tosi, Watchdog, and Steri King. But let's start with the Zen detergents. What can you tell us about those?
Yeah. So Zen detergent, we all joke about the name being Zen, but I guess, the concept is you're supposed to have a peace of mind on what your detergent is doing and what your products are doing for your washers and your instruments. We have a whole line of products now to help the customers from, like Accelerate, which is our pre-treatment sprays. Those actually are good for 100 hours. So usually most of them out on the market are like 72 hours. Ours is good for up to 100 hours. They are also like good. You can use them on eye instruments because they're non-enzymatic. So that's always a big, big hit with customers because now I don't have to have two different products and I don't got to figure out a way to do my eye instruments versus that and people messing it up, So that's great. And then, we have detergent for the sink, our Quadex, and then our neutral and universal. Universal is great if you have hard water issues. The universal detergent really helps with those situations. And then our enzymatics. And, all of these really require less dosing because they have 4 new surfactants in them that really emphasize and help with the work and the job that needs to be done. And so in that sense, because of those new surfactants, it's a less dosing concept. And like our detergents that are like the X, so let's say the neutral X, for instance, it's 10 times more wash cycles for one bottle. So, once again, it's less detergent.
Well, space is an issue, right?
Yeah.
So just
Oh,
being
yeah,
able
for
to
sure.
require less storage. I mean, how many times have you seen a renovation where they're like, oh yeah, I got plenty of space. And by the time the build actually happens, after they discover all the things hidden behind the walls and everything else, it's like, wait a second, how did we wind up with 20% less square footage in this department? And so, I feel like that's always a conversation with detergents is like, how do we need an entire closet to be able to house this, or is there a way for us to reduce, just literally how much storage is required
and
to
it
run the
depends on your
operation day to
system,
day?
right? And it
Yeah.
depends on your connections and how that looks. Some facilities are smaller and they don't have that space to hold those big containers. And then other facilities, so I think us being able to provide a variety of those type of that size and stuff like that is really helpful for the customers to accommodate what they face in their situation.
All right, let's talk about the Tosi. I feel like this is like tried and true. It's a trusted brand that everybody is very well aware of out there.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on Tosi because this is definitely one of those things that we do manufacture. We make them and it's pretty cool, the process and how they're made and stuff and the quality process behind them. So they are made by Healthmark. They have bovine blood on them to like mimic human blood. And they are designed in a specific, I don't know if you've ever looked at one from the side of it. But if you look at it from the side, it gets very skinny and then it gets a little bit wider. And the reason for that is the metal plate in there is like jammed in between the two plastic at the skinny end. So that mimics a box lock. So that's why it's designed like that. And so many people don't, look at it and understand it. And it's like, I'm like, oh my God, it's so cool. Like, okay, geek mode. Anyway, so, and that's why it's designed like that, so that it mimics truly what the instruments are going through, those box locks, the stainless steel strip in there. You don't have plastic instruments. You have stainless steel instruments. So having the blood on that stainless steel really shows, hey, can this clean is your instruments being cleaned properly? And a lot of times, most people will say, okay, well, TOSIs aren't working. They keep failing. So I'm going to go for an easier, simpler concept. And trust me, I used to be one of them. Um, and I would be like, okay, we're not using TOSIs anymore. But really, now that I look back, I'm like, oh my God, why was my TOSIs failing? They were failing because my machine wasn't working.
Yeah, right.
So it's
I
like,
know it's so funny when somebody gets a failed test, they say it's the test's fault. And it's like, no, the whole point of the test is to identify when you need service for your machine. It's so funny.
It's crazy. But, that's our first mindset, right? It's the test. Well, it's kind of, I was just off
especially with
topic
the product conversion though, right? Because
sure.
it wasn't
For sure.
It wasn't failing before, so it must be the test. And it's like, well, sometimes that new test, is all tests are not created equal, so you may get new information from new tests. And sometimes people are like, wait, we didn't have a problem before. Now we have this new test and we have a problem. And
that's
like, no, you had the problem all along. The new test is identifying it. Yeah.
And that's one of the great things too with the TOSI, to your point, is it's not just, okay, if it fails, it fails. If it fails, why did it fail? It kind of, you can see, okay, well, if I still have blood on here, that means most likely that my pre-rinse, the temperature's too hot, or I'm not getting enough of the pre-rinse, right? And so it's baking on the blood, which is making it harder, right? Or do I still have fibrin on this, right? And so if I still see fibrin, is that my detergent? Do I have enough detergent coming in? What does my wash cycles look like? So it lets you really hone in to where are your issues and try to figure it out and solve those by, fixing or adjusting your cycles or your detergent, whatever it may be, to really solve the issue. But to your point about people, that's their first concept is, oh, the test isn't working. It's, it's your washer. We see the same thing with liners in trays. When people start using liners in the bottom of their trays to put their instruments on top of the paper liners, that we get calls all the time like, oh my God, your liners are staining. Oh, no, the liners act as a filter. And it's showing you that you have a problem with your steam, your water coming in has issues. And so that's really just bringing to light an issue that you never knew was there. So, some people are like, okay, well, we're not using these liners anymore because we're not going to fix that. We just don't use the liners. It's just, hey, why not?
All right, let's go to Sterile King. We've got two more. I want to go to Sterile King because the last one talks a lot about, flexible scopes, which you said was a major challenge. And this is exciting new AI technology. So I'm going to save that for last. And then we can talk about how the education team, really goes the extra mile to support the departments that are out there utilizing their products. So let's go to Sterile King. We're talking about peel pouches, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Hey, peel pouches are my favorite. Come on. I'm the packaging
right on.
princess. Come on.
Yeah.
So Sterile King, for me, one of the things that I love is the durability of the pouches themselves. So our pouches have 9 layers on the plastic laminate side of it. And so that, in conjunction with the thickness of the paper, our paper is 70-gram paper. And I'll say most competitors, they're around a 50-gram, 60 at the most I've seen. So our paper is definitely a thicker paper, which helps with holes in packages and stuff like that. And it also can still be double pouched. Our new ones, the long pouches that are used for Da Vinci instrumentation, is 100-gram thick paper. And when you feel those in comparison, it's just crazy, how much thicker they are. And people love those for Da Vinci instrumentation, or, their robotic arms or long instruments that they have, because they're so durable and they fit those perfectly. The other great thing about Sterile King is the pouches is that they have a extended post sterilization shelf life. So pre-sterilization, it's a 5-year shelf life before you use it. Once you sterilize it, your post-sterilization shelf life starts. And so for self-seal, it's a 3-year post-sterilization shelf life. And then for heat seal, it's a 5-year post-sterilization shelf life. And so that's really helpful for facilities. Now, let's be honest, if you have stuff on your shelf still for 5 years and 3 years, yeah, you might want to start doing
But
better
what's great
inventory.
is it kind of takes a little bit of that pressure off, right?
It does, because who's got time every year to go through their peel packs and take everything down and reprocess that? I mean, it's hard. That's hard. I remember when we had to do it back in the days when everything was, 1 year you reprocess everything. And that was so hard to keep track of all of that. And so you still want a good system to keep track of what's happening with your packaging and what your inventory is, right? Because you want to know, like, if I'm not using this anymore, why is it taking up space in my storage? And so I think this, to your point, gives you a little more leniency, a little more like, okay, if you miss a pouch, it's not like the end of the world and you're not going to get dinged for it, kind of thing.
All right, we're getting close to the end of the interview, but we've covered a lot. Everybody is talking about AI and how can AI help me? And some people are afraid of it and some people are like all in. And I feel like, I feel like it's polarizing to some extent. And there are people who are like, ooh, I'm really interested in it. I'll trust it blatantly. And then there are other people who are like, I'll never trust it. And from my perspective, it is really about taking technology and augmenting our ability to do our jobs. And I think one of the things people are totally afraid of is like, AI is going to replace humans. It's never going to replace humans, but it can definitely help us make sure that we are performing at a higher accuracy rate. And one of the things that happened when you started to be able to look down the lumens of flexible scopes is people said, I'm seeing stuff I've never seen before. What do I do with it? That's where Watchdog comes in. Tell me about this, because I think it's super exciting.
Yeah. So, Healthmark, we have our Fizz 007s. And when those came out, like our Fizz 007, that's our bore scope, and there's like 2 different size lumen diameters of it, and then 3 different lengths now, right? And so you're able to go down like your endoscopy scopes. And when those first came out, bore scopes in general, people, to your point, were going down scopes and lumens were like, is this normal? Is this what it should look like? Or am I seeing something? And so there was a lot of learning curves that had to happen, right? And if we really think about it, it's like, a bore scope in general is technology, which kind of, it's not AI, but, everybody was afraid of just basic technology at one point too, right? So now, in conjunction with like our Fizz 007, we have what's called the Watchdog. And so our Watchdog is a support tool that helps like your managers and technicians detect like your issues with your endoscopes and make sure that they're patient safe and ready to use. So it basically, as you put the Fizz down your lumen device, your scopes, the Watchdog the software, it scans as you go down that scope, and it will pick up crimps, scratches, peeling and droplets, and staining. So as it goes through, it identifies, this is a crimp in the scope. Like, so some point this scope got bent or damaged and this is crimped. Now we have a place for microorganisms to hide, and it kind of, will account for all the times it sees a scratch, anytime it sees peeling, and you put in the scope serial number and it keeps track of that as every time you go through and look down that scope. So why is that even important is, let's say, for instance, Dr. Justin, every time he uses a ureteroscope, it comes back and we have a problem with it, right? And every time we tell them, hey, this passed the leak test, for instance, And now every time it comes back after Dr. Justin uses it, it fails the leak test. And they're like, well, you guys are doing something to it, right? And, or no, that's not true. That doesn't happen. So now you've got data to show and you can go, right? Because we know like, I think this is one of the mistakes that we make as managers, and speaking from experience, we go to C-suites and we're like, this always happens and this happens all the time. And they're like, well, how often does it happen? And we're like, every single time, it's like, come on, that's not true. It can't happen every single time. But when you go and you say, hey, here's a report that shows every Tuesday when we check this scope, after Dr. Justin uses it, there is crimps in the scope, there's burn marks, there's, droplets, there's peeling, something's happening in the scope. That speaks a lot more volume than me just screaming and crying, hey, Dr. Justin don't know how to do anything right with the scope, right?
Right.
So,
the whole point about having data
yeah,
and having a really good quality management system, it creates more productive conversations versus the finger pointing. I mean, that's really what you're trying to do, is build a foundation for constructive conversation and actual process improvement. It's such a key factor.
it is. And I think we need to do a better job of teaching managers the importance of that, or people becoming managers and stuff, leadership. And then one of the things that I find extremely fascinating about the Watchdog is it's 4.5 times faster than what a human eye can pick up. So I can take that scope, the fizz, and go down a flexible scope channel at a 4.5 faster rate, right? Like we're just at a fast rate and it's just picking it up. Bing, 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 bings, right? So,
right. It's telling you when to stop.
Well,
and
it
do
tells
more
me
investigation, or
well, it just gives me a report, right? So it's like, okay, you went down this scope in a matter of 10 seconds and we picked up, 5 peeling incidences, 4 scratches, that kind of thing versus, when you think about time and turnover and all that stuff versus me going down going, what is that? Is that, is that a scratch or what is that? So it's so much faster. It's so cool. If you ever get the chance to see it in action at one of the shows, we usually have it at the HSPA shows or sometimes at the chapter meetings or something. Really look at it. It's really cool.
All right. So I'm going to get a couple of quick hitting add-ons here before we wrap up. One is consultative practice reviews, and you have targeted audits like a washer cleaning verification. You kind of alluded to that earlier. You also have a full audit, which is your favorite. And then you have audits for the military, which do have a different regulatory system. And so the audits may look a little bit different, and you are actually tailoring the audits for that audience as well so that they are survey ready. Do you want to just quickly highlight the full audit, and then we can talk a bit about promotions and education before we wrap up?
Yeah. So we provide what's called a consultative practice review, CPRs, pumping life
Bring it back to
into your
life.
department.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so with the CPRs is, like you said, we have targeted ones, which could be like your cleaning verification, like your washers, making sure, testing those, making sure they're functioning correctly. Your insulation, we come in and do a whole audit on insulation, insulated instruments and stuff, and watch that process. And then full CPRs is basically, from top to bottom, like one of the educators coming in like myself and looking at your department from every point of view possible. And sometimes like jokingly, people who know me and I've done these with, they're like, you're worse than Joint Commission. They're like, you're insane. And I'm like, yeah, because I would rather like me tell you and help you versus someone else coming and finding it, right? Or plus we want to keep the patient safe. So the more I can find and help you like bring to light, you can now work on an action plan on fixing it. So it's a friendly set of eyes, just coming in, looking at things from a regulatory and standard perspective. Sometimes we offer like suggestions. Hey, this might be something you can do a little bit better. This is what we've seen in other facilities. And so I think the difference is we don't just come in and say, okay, Justin, you're doing this, this, and this wrong. It's, hey, Justin, these are the things we're seeing. Hey, why don't you try A, B, and C? Maybe if you do this, maybe if you do that, right? And so also in part of that, like educating the staff. A lot of times I will go in and I'll ask the staff questions like, hey, how do you inspect your clamps or this and that? And they will, if they don't know, I'll sit there and teach them right then and there and show them. And a lot of times the things that I love the most about these is getting those light bulb moments where you can just see the dots connecting and the staff are just like, oh, that's why. And I'm like, exactly, that's why. And so that just makes me love doing them even more. And, we've done audits at military facilities. We've done them at, some of the dental clinics for military. And yeah, sometimes their systems are different, like the VA, their systems are a little bit different. But for overall, most of them follow AAMI standards, which kind of makes it easier, right? So if you're following AAMI, you should be, doing the same practices. So, but the ways of doing things might change a little bit.
All right. So that's one major area of education. And guess what? You didn't mention there are no costs to the customer. That's no charge, value added service. And I think, that is really incredible. I don't know many that are doing that to support the industry. You also have the College of Clean. So you can go to hmark.com and you can go there and get all of your CEs for continuing education. It's quite likely you're out there listening, and the games are so much fun.
Yeah. I love the games.
And what about the awards? As we're wrapping up here, awards for SPD Week, they're vendor nominated. So how do you apply for that award? Or do you ask a vendor to, kind of submit those awards based on their kind of work with you?
Yeah. So the awards that we're talking about are like the awards we give out during CS week. And so there's 3 awards that are given out. And one is the Quality Defender Award, Patient Protector Award, and Inspection Innovator Award. And so anybody can actually nominate, but it's usually like the reps who go into the facilities and they're like, oh, you have installation testers at every workstation. You're really involved in patient safety and making sure everything gets tested correctly, that kind of thing. That would be Patient Protector Award, for instance. So, you can go to the website and nominate your team for these awards, or you can reach out to your rep and be like, hey, I heard there's an award, we want to be nominated for this too.
That's great.
So I think that's great.
Well, and so we talked about that, the awards. SPD Week is coming right up. If this doesn't actually air during SPD Week, which it often does, because we do one of these spotlights every single year with Healthmark. And I also want to let everybody know that there are monthly webinars. So I pointed everyone in the direction of hmark.com and then go to the education tab. You can sign up also to participate in monthly webinars. If you are interested in one of those consultative practice reviews, definitely reach out to your local rep. And of course, we love social media here at Beyond Clean. Follow Healthmark on LinkedIn. Melinda, you did a great job today. Sure. Thanks for coming on. Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, monthly webinars, October. I will be doing the October one. It's Nightmare on SPD Street.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Great teaser.
Yeah. So definitely sign up for those. It's great. They're great CE credits. You get 1 CE credit and just great information in general. So.
That was Malinda Elammari, Clinical Education Specialist with Healthmark, now at Getinge Company. We talked about a number of things, specifically her role in education. We highlighted Zen Detergent, the Tosi Steri King, and she is involved in packaging, the work group with Amy, and she cares about peel pouches. We heard all about that today. And obviously AI technology with the Fizz 007. I love it. It's very James Bond and also high tech. And I think leveraging AI to help people operationalize things to do a better job in our departments, process improvements without adding a lot of extra time and work is so critical. Did a great job. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this Vendor Spotlight on Beyond Clean.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.